Hello. Welcome to TrueHoop with me, Jarod, Hector, and Henry Abbott. How are you, sir?
It's standing in for David Thorpe, who's in Denver.
Watching some nuggets, I would imagine.
Mexican restaurant looks like in the photo.
What did you say? You're like, whose lodge are you in?
It looked like he was in a hunting lodge in the photo he sent. And he like legit got insecure about that. He was like, no, it's highly recommended. Like, you know, right? He was like,
classic David.
Yeah.
Classic David.
I was just
making a funny. Like you're making a funny. That part of the country though, Colorado, Utah, like a lot of like the Arabic restaurants and stuff have that lodgy look. And I imagine it's probably done on purpose because that's like, you know, how the West was won, that kind of thing.
If you're just listening and on YouTube, you don't know how unlodgy Jarod looks right now. In it's like the nicest clothing anyone's ever worn in this podcast. He's wearing like a
nice textured zip sweater. Yeah.
No, I'm wearing a hoodie.
I mean, most of the time hoodies are what I have on, but you know, sometimes you gotta dress it up. All right, Henry, lots happening in the basketball world. Most teams have about, 5 games left or so, and then it's go time, man. Play in and then playoffs. Of course, at the worst time of the year when everybody's dead. But, you know, it is what it is, and that's what we do here. But something has been on my mind for quite a long time. And various things that happen in the basketball discourse spark it up and cause me to be like, man, we really got to think about this and talk about this. I feel like there is a war going on for the soul of basketball. And the war is between the jocks and the nerds. Now, I am not going to put myself in either category. Henry will probably place himself in the nerd category, if I were to guess.
I think I'm certainly a nerd defender. And a nerd. I mean, to be honest,
But you're also a jock too.
I've been I can't go a day without moving, right?
So you're all
my whole family's like this, right? Like we are. I mean, we're not like in the NBA context, we are not jocks.
Well, we're not NBA players, yeah.
Compared to most families, like we're jocks, you know. Like, yeah,
you're nerd jocks or jock nerds. I'm gonna go whichever one you want to lead with. Okay, very good.
Right?
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
And like in any war, Henry, there are casualties of war and collateral damage.
Wow.
And there is. It's just how wars work.
It just sounds so dire.
But
we're talking about John Holland.
And to me, I feel like the collateral damage and the casualties of war are basketball fans who actually love the game. And they don't know what to do, who to listen to, who to roll with, right? And who does what. And just to do a quick top line, you know, you have Charles Barkley et al., right? He is the face of Jocks. He is one of the greatest jocks of all time, right? Like, and he's the face of the NBA's most popular television show inside the NBA, right? That's his show, as much as Ernie and everybody else. No, it's Charles's show. And Charles is famously, he hates analytics. Jump shooting teams don't win championships, despite everything being proven wrong. He knows what he's talking about because he played in the NBA, and you dummies with spreadsheets did not. Okay. On the other side, you have the nerds who say, yeah, but that means you just don't understand math, dude. Like, it's right here. The data's right here. I don't care what your eyes and what your experience says. This is what it is. And this push-pull, this tug-of-war is problematic on both ends, right? Because I feel like both sides are saying the same thing. You're an idiot, and you don't know what you're talking about. And that's not good for the fans who actually love basketball.
Do we have like 9 hours for me to monologue now?
Yeah.
So much going on.
So much going
on. I guess I want to separate a little bit. Like on Twitter, there are like air quotes nerds who are saying you're all idiots, right?
Yes.
Like Sachin Gupta, who's one of the smartest people in the NBA, and he has never accused anyone. He's like the nicest man. Like anyone who thinks that he's going around saying you guys are full of shit, it's like just completely wrong. Like in a meeting, he's like, I assume you're right. People fucking love that guy, right? Like he's literally the nicest man in the world.
And tell people who Sachin Gupta is for those who may not.
He has been he worked at ESPN and made the Trade Machine years ago, and then the Rockets hired him away. And then he was at the Sixers with the Hinkie for a while, and now he's a big wig at the Pistons.
Pistons, yeah,
right.
Timberwolves.
You're right.
Timberwolves.
I'm already have suspect information today. So like, And meanwhile, like, Dean Oliver, who like wrote the book on this, like, he's been on the bench. He's on the bench for the Wizards right now, right? Nobody thinks he's bossing them around or calling them stupid, right? He literally said at Sloan, like, his default position is that whatever the coach says is right. Whatever the player says is right? Like, so this notion that, like, the nerds arrived and just started calling them stupid is, like, it's fucking bullshit. Like, John Hollinger's not that guy, right? Like, it's not what happened here, right? Like, instead what happened was, what works in basketball was no longer a lock that, like, the head coaches, who are mostly former players, like, got to just dictate it, right? Like, the first post in the history of TrueHoop was, like, I went back when, like, Mike D'Antoni's Suns team was nearly at the top of the West. If you went back and looked at his preseason coach's call, he was like, basically, we're probably not going to make the playoffs. And, like, Nate McMillan's Sonics team, I think that year was really good. And he'd also said that, and on, like, people just don't know, right? Like, there's just, like, these are predictions of the weather, predictions of everything is super hard.
It's hard to predict. Yeah.
And it was handy to these kind of demagogue type people to just, like, pretend with the microphones gathered around that, like, they were the, like, Yodas of this world, right? And that was very useful for their incomes. That was very useful for getting players to do stuff. Like, they got to just be like, like, people would say, like, oh, well, George Karl said, and it carried, like, all this
a lot of weight,
right? Like, but what just emerged was, like, they were not right about everything. And we knew that because of dorks, right? Dorks showed up. And, like, honestly, I still think one of the most important articles in the history of NBA basketball is Tom Haberstroh on, like, the NBA's 35-year war on the three-pointer. Like, all of these Pat Rileys and Greg Popovich's and Larry Browns, like, we're like, we just don't like it. We just don't want to do it. Rick Pitino did a thing with the Knicks, whatever. And they were like, well, we just prefer not to use it. And it's like, well, what a fucking luxury to be an idiot and keep your job. Right? Like, and then dorks came along. They're like, three-pointers probably can help your team. And now every single team in the league shoots, like, quadruple, 5 times as many threes as anybody.
35 teams on average a night.
Yeah. And, like, they were like, we will never, like, Kyle Korver, I've cited this many times, but he was in the league for almost half a decade before someone ran a play designed for him to shoot a three. He tells me that, right? Like, what a fucking bunch of idiots ran his career. Like, and, like, it's like, they're just wrong. So to me, I'm like, okay, this is the situation we're in. Like, I don't have to enjoy it. There's no victory here. It's just like, if you want to win, you're going to have to be a little more curious, right? You just don't get to stand there, sit back in your lazy boy and be like, I'm fucking threes. Like, that is wrong. It's wrong. Like, like, you have to be a little smarter than that. And some people went and did their homework, and, like, and it's not as simple as 3 is a bigger number than 2. It's much more complicated than that. Like, it really comes from, adjusted plus minus. And you'd notice that, like, lineups with multiple 3-point shooters, you could project how well they do, and they just did better than that. Like, they just took off on the wings of angels. These lineups had something special that people couldn't explain. And now we know what they did was they stretched the defense wafer thin. And so you got to attack more everywhere, right?
More
we didn't know what was going on. Like, but that was the first big domino to fall. And, like, your coaches who, your Larry Birds don't know everything. Like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. But if you want to win, you're going to have someone on the roster who cares about what he doesn't know, right? That person's going to be a dork.
So curiosity is the piece you hit on there, and I think that's the important part, right? So what you're saying is, you're not saying that the dorks, they know everything either. You're just saying they're wondering, well, why is this? Why does this cause us to score more points than this? What is the reason? And can we use that and exploit it so that we keep scoring more points and winning? Because ultimately, the goal is to score more points than the other team and to win the game. That is the goal.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If that's the goal, then you probably aren't going to be the best in the world at it by doing things that are comfortable in the way they've always been done.
I love it. So one of the first things I learned from TrueHoop when it was back on that other network with 4 letters that we won't say,
I have no idea what you're talking about,
is to be curious about basketball, right? I always say this on this show, and, David's my guy. I always talk about it. One of the first things I heard David say before I knew him was, when you watch basketball, try not to watch the basketball and see what else is going on. As I've said a million times, that's fucking really hard to do, okay? Because your eyes naturally follow the ball.
The ball's kind of fun.
That's just what it wants to do. Like, it just does. But the other stuff tells you, why is this guy just standing there? Or, oh, what's that other? Why is he setting a pick for someone away from the basketball? That might inform something else that happens later in the day. Draymond Green said this recently, very famously once. People watch basketball and they think they watch somebody score and they know what happens. They have no fucking idea what happens. But Henry, that is what fans do, right? And I'm not saying calling fans dumb, because we're all fans. That's when we go to a game, whether we're covering it or we're there as a fan, our eyes watch Damian Lillard score a logo 3 and we say, fucking Damian Lillard's amazing. He is, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah, it's a complicated game. I mean, people are complicated.
True.
And they have 10 of them on the floor the whole time. And they move in complicated ways. And like some of those ways are more useful than others, right? And, David says all the time, like basically college players like appear to work harder.
Right. But
so
they're not.
They run around and like spaz. Like there's a lot of movement with no effect, right? And so the question is like, which movements are effective? And in that, like the eye test has long been the best that we had available, but it's not the best available anymore, right?
Great.
Like this is Moneyball, right? Is like, like, boy, everyone should look like Billy Bean and be a big long-limbed slugger, blonde hair from the Midwest, right? Like, and that's how baseball worked. But then it's like, well, actually, like this overweight kid who sees the strike zone really well and gets on base a lot, like, is nobody's dream of an employee. Like, they don't put him on a poster, but that's how you win games, right? And so, what are those things in basketball, right? And we've just, we're inundated with examples of. Well, I'm pretty proud of this little list I made in our doc here.
You made a little list here.
Okay, so Draymond Green, Kawhi Leonard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Drew Holiday, Kevon Looney, Kyle Lowry, all like starters and absolutely essential to title teams, and none of them in the lottery, right?
Not one.
Because if any of them averaged 30 points a game in college, they all would have been in the lottery, right? But they do the things that are just slightly harder to notice, right? Like most Slate's defense, right? I think that after the 3-pointer became like the first big like analytics know a thing, right? Like the next thing was like what works on defense isn't exactly what we thought, right? Like we thought it was Mark Eaton. We thought it was like
it's not Mark Eaton.
You need hips. You need to be able to move your hips, right? Like that's part of it, right? Like you need to be able to run around and what does Kyle Lowry do exactly, right? Like it's like you need to do all that stuff.
Right.
It's just very confusing what it is. And you're probably not going to send your scout to find the next Kyle Lowry. Like you probably need to see like, I know that Kyle Lowry's like plus minus data at Villanova where he was playing like a big man. He played like 4 and 5 at times at Villanova, like was ridiculous. And without plus minus data, he might not be in the NBA at all. Right. So I think there's like curiosity again, right? Just like, we're going to keep learning. Some of the big lessons are now pretty obvious and every team uses them. Another one from the early days of analytics was scouts were adamant that like what works to rebound in college doesn't work to rebound in the pros. So like you need Kevin Willis type bodies to rebound in the pros, even if Carl Landry like was an incredible rebounder in college. And now there's like pretty deep research. Like that's just horse crap. Like it's mostly about your brain. It's mostly about, do you run all over the court to go where the rebound is? And then when you get there, are you feisty as fuck? Like, it's not so much about your reach. It's not so much about your, height or your leg length or all that stuff. So like all the, and basically Paul Millsap, Carl Landry, there's a reason they were both Rockets.
Right.
Because like they were one of the first teams using analytics. But like they rebounded very well in the NBA. Right. And so, no. Like you have to be curious.
It's interesting that you mentioned I mentioned Draymond right at the start about you think you watch a guy score and you know what happens, and you mentioned he was a second round pick. Chuck famously calls Draymond Mr. Triple Single, and the thing I love to push back at Chuck is but if you played with Draymond Green in 1993 against the Bulls, you probably win the NBA championship.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Like he does all the other things that are so vital and critical to help you win and. Right. Ultimately, the end of the day is winning the game. Right. Like that's the goal. Now we have with analytics, right? Because as you said, and with data, like it's not perfect, right? Because nothing is perfect, right? You said it's complicated. How do we figure out what the data is not good at telling us, right? Like it tells us all these things, right? But Well, it's not good. It's something, right? So, for instance, EPM is a stat that we love here at TrueHoop. We're not the only ones. Although I think we might have started the EPM revolution. Now everybody's on it. I want to take credit for that. Whatever.
Sure,
we did.
Why not? Yeah.
We did totally. Defensive EPM right now says that Alex Caruso is the best defender in the league, right? So if you're a fan watching, now Alex Caruso is a very good defender. Is he the best defender in the league? Well, according to this metric, he is. What is the metric good at telling us, and what is there maybe some holes that it's not telling us?
I think like every year at Sloan, Mike Zarin of the Celtics, who's like the smartest guy in basketball, basically, will go on and on. I'll put him on a panel about like, what are the best numbers and how do they work? And he'll be like, you guys, like, we don't use like one number for a player. I'm like,
right, yeah.
And he has this big lecture that he goes on about, and like, they're much more granular than they're going to go down and be like, see who closes out the corner shooter best and on, which is kind of true. But our brains don't work that way. Like, we're not actually we can't handle
too much data,
right? Yeah. The fact is, we kind of want to know the ranking. We kind of want to know. We want Alex Caruso not just to be rated very good. We want him to be rated like whatever his number. I'm sure he's like he's gonna be like plus 6.7 or something, right? Like, and then I mean someone else is plus 6.6. I'm like, so, I don't think anybody would say he's really definitively 0.1 better than like the real
Jarod
accurate way to do it is tiers, right? He's in the top tier. Like, as are 20 people, right? You put him out there, your defense is going to get better. You take him off the floor, your defense is going to get worse. That's definitely true, right? It just is. At that extreme, like, the numbers can't be wrong. Super valuable just for that, right? Like, he just keeps helping the defense. Like, that's not true of very many people. And it's true. And there are a bunch of people who, like, look to be amazing on defense, but in fact, the team just doesn't stop people when they're out there. Like, you kind of want to know that, right? One of the big roles here isn't to be super accurate in counting, although that matters. It's more just like to see all the plays, right? Like, we can only watch so many games. And, if you, I don't know, there are times where like Richaun Holmes was like super elite. And I didn't see him play that whole year. You know what I mean? I'm like, you know what I mean? It's just too many games, right?
Too many games.
It's like, I guess he's killing it. I'm not looking. But...
I ain't watching, but he's pretty good.
So I think there's like it's probably not. It's asking an insane question to ask, like, have we perfectly modeled human behavior in this dynamic environment? It's like, no, but we're pretty fucking good at it.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty stable. If it were random and flawed, it would bounce around from year to year. Right?
It doesn't.
It doesn't bounce very much.
No.
Like, it's pretty stable.
What you just said there is pretty dead on, because that, when any one year, again, using EPM as our guide here, the top 15 is pretty much the same guys. It may, fourth may go to seventh, whatever, but the best 15 guys, according to that metric, have been the best 15 guys for the last X amount of years. So it's like what Seth Partnow does with his player tier system. He doesn't rank them. He's not saying, all he's saying is Steph Curry, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, those people are in the best tier. You do whatever you want with it after that. The next tier after that are these groups of players, and so on.
But I would point out, like, to underscore my earlier point about how we just prefer rankings, like, I mean, he publishes his tiers.
People
and then
get so mad.
An almighty, like, week-long Twitter battle with everybody who thinks, like, how did you put, like, Durant ahead of Steph? And he's like, no, they're in the same tier. And they're like, no, it says right here. Like, we literally can't fucking process it. Like, we just can't handle the idea that, like, they're all very good. Everyone's like, who's fourth? He's like, no, there are 4 in the tier. Like, he just does that for a week on Twitter. Like, I've published tiers, like Zach Lowe's published tiers. Like, the fact is, like, the audience just isn't ready for tiers.
They don't want tiers. They want to know who is better.
Yes. Who's 7th and who's 8th and whatever. And so, like, I mean, when I first got to ESPN, they rank everything, and I was like, rankings are stupid. And they were like, yeah, we all know rankings are stupid. But, like, what else are you going to do? Like, this is just how our brains work. Like, and if you put it in a ranking, everybody understands what you said. And if you don't, and nobody understands what you said. So it's like, use the tool, right? Like, use the tool. Like, we're about to rank on this show, right? Like,
we always rank our top 5 teams. We got to, because I can't just say this is the championship tier, because you'll be like, well, who's better? I don't know.
You're officially useless. That's what you're
saying. So one of the interesting things about advanced stats is it's an aggregate of the entire year, right? So it's 82 games. It's the data from 82 games. and that tells us a picture. That picture is right. I mean, we have 5 games left, but that picture is the top 5 players in the league according to estimated plus minus are Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid. Where's the rest of my data here? Giannis. No, not Giannis. Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard. Right? Those are the 5 best players according to EPM. Now, when we have playoffs and smaller sample size situations, right, like a 7-game series, sometimes those numbers from the 82 games to the 7 games may not quite work out the same way because it's just less runway, right? So, for instance, if you are a career 42% 3-point shooter for the season, right? That doesn't mean you shot 42% from October to April. You had a month where you shot 48 and whatever, right? And then, but it averaged out to whatever. Problem is if you have 2 games and to start your playoff series and you shoot 30%, you may never get a chance to get back to 42 because you're down 0-2 and you might lose, and there goes that. So how do we deal with the change in regular season data to playoff data, right? Because there is variance there, particularly with the 3-point shot. I go back to the Rockets series where they lost to the Warriors in 2017. The Rockets shot 36% for the year from 3. In that series, they shot 31%. Now, I want to be clear. Everybody, their efficiency goes down in the playoffs in the history of the NBA, except for like 2 people. I think like Kareem and LeBron maybe. But everybody else gets worse because the fucking defense is better. That's just how it works. But if the Rockets still shot worse but shot 33% instead of 31%, they probably win that series. So how do we deal with, all right, this is what the data said, but fuck, it's the playoffs, man, so that shit may not matter.
I mean, this is how San Diego State makes the Final Four, right? Like it's, you know, the whole point of it is wild things happen, right? This is why predicting is hard in every single thing that happens on the planet, right? I'm pretty happy with my analogy that you didn't like in our
you use it. I was just kidding. Use it. We have this document, folks, and Henry's like, so here's kind of what we did to start the show. I knew when I put this paragraph in, it would send Henry off on a roll.
It started with our texting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you were like, save this for the show.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so let's go with your analogy.
Okay, so let's say you had a really good system for counting cards in the casino, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you got, I've heard these explanations of like, you know how many face cards are left in the deck, so you know when to bet because it's more likely you're about to get another face card, right? Because you're counting. If it came down to your point, like, you could know the count, but when you're playing just one hand and you're betting on one card, like the next card, it might just be a 4.
It might.
But like, it doesn't make counting cards useless, right? Like to me, like you would want to count cards more than ever in that moment. And you just have to accept that, like,
sometimes you're going to lose.
Want the best information. You want to use, like, so if you're going to predict the future, you want to use factors that have been useful in predicting the future in the past, right? And so what are those? Like, it's really not like, I would love to run a team that plays against a team that says, like, that guy looks like he has the eye of the tiger today, right? Like, if that's kind of how you're rolling,
you're going to beat that team every time.
Well, won't be you like 70%
not every time.
of the time? Like, win a lot, right? And that kind of edge is huge, right? So like, you just want to look for things that are useful, right? So, you want to, there are infinite number of factors that could affect a game. If someone has this breakfast instead of that one, or sleeps well, or has a fight with a spouse or loved one, like all these things matter, right? Like we'll never be able to like hammer this down, but like, there are some things that matter. It's like, well, can we get people open is a big one, right? It's like, well, if you're good at getting people open with good looks, like, it doesn't guarantee victory in the playoffs, but that's the kind of thing you want to focus on. Like, can we scheme to defend this kind of offensive player? Like, well, if you've been working on that all regular season, then probably, like, regular season success does correlate with postseason success, right? Not perfectly, and there's some exceptions there, but like by and large, like, it's basketball. You want to be good at basketball. So yeah, I think, again, I would stay curious to anything that might help you and roll with it, right? And this includes, I think, the advanced analytics are especially valuable when it's unconventional, right? Which is weird. It's a little bit of a mindfuck. Like, I know when they create new stats like EPM, one of the things they do is run it and then see if it looks like it makes sense. if you end up at the top is like, someone no one's ever heard of, if Khem Birch is the best player in the NBA,
we messed up.
On the other hand, that's when it's most valuable. Like, if you end up with a list that looks just like the scoring leaders of the league,
right?
You don't need this stat. Right. We already have that list, right?
Scoring leaders of the league.
And so, like, like when Kevin Pelton was using his analysis to predict who was valuable in the 2014 draft, he was like Nurkic and Jokic, which were like from outer space.
Right. People are like, what? That's crazy. Nobody wants those guys. And
so valuable.
And he was right.
He was totally right. And like, and some people were on this Giannis thing and some, and on and on. Like, but I think like, so if you are going into the playoff series and you have some like, it seems like this Landry Shamet really makes it, whatever the hell the thing is that sounds crazy. That might be the most valuable thing the stats tell you, right? Because like, you have this thing that other people wouldn't do.
But how do we create that environment? Because now this is the human part of it, right? Where it's allows that to happen. And I feel like the NBA is not the place for that because the people that run it don't want that, right? Like, you're not going to tell Nate McMillan or who. Nope. Like, I have 40 years of coaching experience. I'm not listening to that. That is crazy.
Well, I think what's going to happen is like it will become part of the culture of the leadership. So like right now, no one gets in trouble for not playing like the young player who can really make a difference, right? But because no one understands it, right? The billionaire doesn't understand it. The team president doesn't understand it. Similarly, like, it used to be fine for managers to make employees cry in regular businesses, right? Now it's like, oh my gosh, that's an unsafe feeling at work that dampens our productivity. Even if we're just selfish bastards and want to make money, we still don't want that to happen, right? Like, so now that's folded into like, hey, well, it seems like you were a little aggressive with your review here, Jim, right?
Jim.
Fucking Jim, man.
His name was definitely Jim. It was definitely Jim.
Now that's on the list of things that gets you advanced or not in your career, right? Like, it's like that a little bit now, right? Like, it's, this is why Charles Barkley doesn't have a job running a team, right? It's because he's not curious.
He is not
It's
curious.
literally why he's bummed. This is why he's so anti-analytics. Like, because analytics has cost him his second career he wanted, right? Like, he
wanted to run a team.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
He can't keep up, right? Like this, he's not curious enough. He didn't do his homework. Like he thinks that he should be able to, like, he's right in the sense like Jeff Petrie was a lazy dumb fucker. Like,
he was
and
right
Jeff
about that.
Petrie, actually Charles is way smarter than Jeff, right? Even though Jeff went to Yale. Like, but like Jeff Petrie got to like, not show up for work very much, call the shots, pretend like he was some kind of like magical wizard and be okay at his job, right? And be respected. Like, that was how the job was done when Charles played, right? And he is ready to do the job that way. He'd probably be better at it than most if he do it that way.
Right.
But Daryl Morey had like 10 people, analysts spread all over the world who were, all these Sachin Guptas digging into all this stuff. And they learned crazy stuff about like how you offer a free agent contract to Jeremy Lin that no one can match. Right. And they just kept getting players all these ways that no one could get just by just elbow grease. And it drove people insane, right? They're like, we don't want this to be a 70-hour-a-week job. Like, they didn't want that. And so, like, I think a lot of the anti-analytics is just that. It's like we're supposed to work as hard as the players. Like, get out of here. Like, we golf.
We golf.
Anyway, Jarod, did I answer your question?
No. Listen, I love it. This is the thing. No, it's important because again, I do. This is the conversation. And so back to something you said about our, human beings, our brains, we need ranks. Don't tell me the 5 go in a tier. So this is the problem with rings culture, right? Because that is a definable thing. At the end of the year, one team wins a championship. 20 other teams, fucking losers, right? That's how the system works. And as crude as it is, it makes sense in our simple brains, right? Yeah, this team's the best. All 29, you guys, you stink. But that's not winning the NBA regular season is a big fucking deal, right? That's a huge deal to win 64 games or 58 games or whatever. That matters. To get to the conference finals, that matters, right? Like all these different pieces matter. But you and this goes back to the Jokic situation. So in 3 playoffs, he's been to a conference finals and a conference semis, and I think he got swept in the first round or lost in the first round, maybe once or twice. But if he wins his 3rd MVP this year, Henry, and they don't win the NBA Finals, problems. Discourse is going to get real stupid. It already is stupid. It's going to get dumber than it already is.
There used to be a player like this, right? Like they had a huge mural in Cleveland that said "Witness," right? And
I know who you're talking about.
Jesus style, right? And like I that draft day that year after Cavs like flamed out, I think in the 2nd round against the Celtics. That's right. And I went for a jog with NBA super agent Dan Fagan, and he was basically like, "This is all going to look really stupid if he doesn't get a title soon," right? Like a Jesus mural,
right?
Like
right, yeah,
like it's just way beyond, right? But like that guy turned out okay,
sure, pretty good.
Like
worked out pretty well
for exactly this reason, right? Like because like his performance was absolutely off the charts superior, which sometimes results in a title.
Sometimes, and oftentimes it doesn't, though.
It gets you like being about as good as anyone's ever been in the game gets you so like your team is like on one side of a 6-sided dice, but then the playoffs just roll,
yeah,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it didn't come up, Cavs. It bummer, like
sometimes it doesn't.
Almost every one of those years, it was predictable that it wouldn't, right? And like same with Jokic, like he wasn't on the top team, but that doesn't mean like I apologize for repeating myself. I've said this a billion times on the show, but like Minnesota Kevin Garnett was the best player in the league. Then you got a little worse. I went to Boston, and now we understand he's good. Like, that's on us. Like, right? like, it just can be the case that your team isn't that good. Like, it just can. Or your team's really good, and you just didn't win that year because somebody
shitty luck. Yeah,
someone was hungover or whatever. Like, shit happens.
What are you talking about? Who was hungover, Henry?
There is a LeBron in Cleveland. LeBron like had a teammate in Cleveland who was hungover, and like that's broke his heart. Right? Like this stuff happens. Like. It happens.
Hungover teammates do not win you championships. Newsflash, people.
They used to. Back when the league was full of like people who went into games high on drugs and smoking cigarettes at halftime, like that. I was covering the league when that happened.
You're like, it would work then, not now.
But now, honestly, thanks in no small part to analytics, which sniffs out like people who can't fucking run and jump, right? Like, these people play really hard. Like they work really hard. They're trying to get good night's sleep and they're trying to eat berries. Like these are professionals.
Berries.
Everybody's vegan. Everybody meditates.
They're trying to eat berries. Stuff. Yeah, no. Listen, they put a lot of time and effort into their bodies to be in the best possible condition they can be, and still at the end of the day, it's still a roll of the dice, right? It might come up snake eyes for you. It's all right.
Yeah.
I thought this was an interesting exercise, Henry. I did the top 15 players on 4, we can call them metrics.
Okay.
EPM, points per game, 538's overall Raptor. And then randomly, because I couldn't think of a traditional stat besides points per game that was like all encompassing. I was like, fuck, okay. What's a good traditional stat that's all encompassing besides points per game? So I went with minutes played, minutes per game. I was like, all right. Because the thought process there being, if you're playing the most minutes, it's because your team thinks you're good. Like, all right. I mean, except in the case of teams that are trying to tank who purposely play shitty players because they want to be bad. But I don't think that's the case with most of the guys on this list. All right. Here's what I found. Really interesting things. A lot of overlap with names. Mm-hmm. Jokic, Embiid, Lillard, Butler, Leonard, Durant, Antetokounmpo, Luka, Steph, LeBron, SGA, Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, James Harden, Jason Tatum. That's the top 15 on EPM. Mm-hmm. Top 15 in points per game. Embiid, Doncic, Dame, SGA, Giannis, Tatum, Mitchell, John Morant, Jaylen Brown, Kyrie Irving, Trae Young, Lauri Markkanen, De'Aaron Fox, Julius Randle, Zach LaVine. And that was instructive because that's the list where you have the most variance, right? Mm-hmm. Everything else is pretty much right on. All right, we go back to overall, 538's overall Raptor. Jokic, Embiid, Doncic, AD, Dame, Kawhi, Giannis, Steph, Jimmy Butler, James Harden, John Morant, Kyrie, Alex Caruso, Tyrese Halliburton, Kevin Durant. And then minutes played, this is an injury thing, so it's kind of weird, but Pascal, Tatum, Harden, Kyrie, Van Vliet, DeMar, DeJounte, Luka, Dame, Zach, Anthony Edwards, Mikal Bridges, Jaylen Brown, Jeremy Grant, OG Anunoby. I was like, this is really fascinating. I think the one thing we do, which is we learned a long time ago, all 20-point per game scorers are not created equally, right? Like, Nikola Jokic is not on that list, right, of top scorers in the league, but he is on that list and at the top of two of the other major metrics, right? Like, which is EPM. And I feel like we've explained it before, but for those of you who don't know, EPM measures your effectiveness on the floor per 100 possessions relative to your teammates and the opposition, right? So if you are plus, that's good. So Jokic is like a plus 8.5. So that means when he's on the floor, the Nuggets are 8.5 points per 100 possessions better, right? And it's by far not as far, but that's the best number in the league.
And it has some so there were a bunch of like pure adjusted plus minus, which is what you just described. This one has some like box score and like second spectrum type inputs, right? So it has like it's been goosed up a little with some of the like ways we can improve the model of just plus minus.
It's got a little zhuzh, as they say. It's fascinating, and I think one of the pieces that not even anti, but people who, again, because I think it's human brains, Henry, and I have these conversations with fans either emailing me of stuff we say, or you're like, but I don't get it. Like, how come he's so much better? Why is he at the top of these metrics, but not at the top of those metrics? Right. And it's I think a difficult thing because our eyes understand points scored and rebounds. Right. I don't think our eyes really understand assists, although they kind of do. You know what I mean? Like, I think they understand, like, and sorry, this is bad, but whatever. They understand the Russell Westbrook assist, right? Pass that leads to direct score, right? They get. But I feel like they don't see the passing open thing, right? Like, they don't, like, I don't think our eyes see that. So like that's also an interesting piece of this, right? It's like, he's the advanced stats darling. And for people who don't see it, they're like, well, this can't be right. Why are you just telling me because these numbers say it? Why are those numbers better than these other numbers that say Joel Embiid and whoever else are better?
Because we're trying to outscore the other team. I mean, like, it's so over here on like the one hand we have like Trae Young was very high in points per game.
Yes,
right. He's the Allen Iverson type, right?
Correct.
This is the type that we've had in the NBA of like tiny dudes who score in really beautiful ways,
very beautiful, and
don't play good defense.
No,
right? And so, Allen Iverson led the whole league in scoring and won the MVP. And, but now we know, okay, to the other end, so that's one type of player. The opposite type is Draymond Green, who, like, you could go to a whole game, and other than when he's beefing with somebody during a dead ball situation, you probably wouldn't know what he did.
Right.
But he led the whole league in adjusted plus minus. He actually had the best adjusted plus minus of all time. Right. So, if I've learned nothing, this is a Henry Abbott original observation, but I stand by it 10,000%. If you learned nothing else from today, it's this: like, basketball is trading possessions for points. In some views, possessions switch, which means like if we get an offensive rebound, that's still just one possession, right?
So not an extra possession.
Yeah, see, those are like attempts versus possessions, but in most analytics, it's simpler to say just we have the ball until we don't have the ball. So like in that model, every team has equal possessions other than end of quarters, right? Like you can vary by 2. So you might have 2 more possessions or 1 possession or equal. This is the total variance we can have in possessions. So 2 teams go to battle, and it's like you're going shopping with the same amount of money. It's like, what can you bring back, right? So we need to turn points and possessions into points. There's nothing else that we do. I mean, we just stop you doing the same thing.
Correct.
Right? So I think it's easy for me, an actual basketball dumb shit, to like just say, I don't know what. Like for David, I think he knows a lot, so it's hard for him just to accept to be curious here, right? But like, so I'm like, Draymond's doing all sorts of things all over the court, many of which are obscure to me, right? But the fact is, their combined effect is bigger than Iverson's, which is a big thing to say because everybody knows Allen Iverson is an absolute god.
Correct.
And you can see him being a god, right? with Draymond, it's like, what did he do? He trips people.
He punches people in the nuts.
He sets. They were like, he sets screens at really good angles. It's like,
you're like, what?
Okay.
I don't get that.
Like, we get a title for that? Like, I just think that it's those things add up to more.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, so obviously, if you want to build Wolverine here, you're going to want like some elements of Iverson and some elements of Draymond, right? Mm-hmm. But it's way more Draymond than we thought, right? And so this is why Giannis can't shoot,
right?
Correct. He can't shoot. He can't do the only thing that most fans care about. He can't do it, right? Mm-hmm. He can put his chest in your face and dunk over you, but he can't shoot. Right?
Certainly
he can't
do
make
that.
Free throws, and he's an MVP and a champion, right? It's like, well, that is kind of a pretty good version of Wolverine.
You're like, that seems pretty good to me.
I will stay open-minded about non-shooters a little bit, right?
I mean, it helps he's 7 foot tall and fucking super athletic, and all the other those things all help.
Every year there are super long super athletes who don't
be on it, yeah, who don't become Giannis.
And he sees some stuff, right? And so there, when I went to the draft combine in Chicago for the book, really, I got there and I asked the people from P3 who've been assessing all of these players, right? They do who do you think is going to be good out of this draft, right? And this is insight with no basketball in it whatsoever. They are not assessing shooting or rebounding or basketball stats in any way, shape, or form.
Assessing movement, right?
Assessing movement. And they're like, Jalen Williams is a rock star.
And lo and behold.
Yeah. They assessed him 7 weeks before the combine. So he's he's 100th on draft board at this time, right? Mm-hmm. And there's just stuff that works in basketball. What they know is how fast can he slide left compared to how fast offensive players drive right, and all this kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then actually they do know how long his arms are, which is
very long.
Insane.
Very long. That helps. Wingspans, that matters.
But anyway, I feel like this kind of stuff is the Draymond stuff is a big treasure chest of magical things, and it has to do with his brain processing really fast. It has to do with his eyes, and it has to do with his head on a pivot, and all this stuff that Kyle Lowry stuff. It's not BS.
Do we? Does P3 do that, or does the movement test tell them how fast the brain do they have brain processing?
No, they don't. Okay. They actually they didn't do that. They actually used to in the earliest days. They did have some kind of brain thing, but they were like this movement data is just once in a while. Marcus is the movement data is just so good. You don't
fuck the brain stuff.
Everything else. Yeah.
I love it. No, I think this is helpful, guys. This is very important. We here at TrueHoop, we love basketball. There are plenty of fans of the games. You love it too. We want you to be curious about the game, and just because something sounds a little wonky, and because your eyes don't believe that, well, I'm not saying don't trust your eyes. I'm just saying ask questions. Were my eyes correct? Was what I saw what actually happened? Then you dig back, right? And you say, maybe that's not the case. My favorite one for this, and because you got death threats from his fan base.
No.
I kept, during the time, and I really didn't have a dog in the fight. I mean, I wasn't a Kobe guy, but I could recognize the value he brought. I kept trying to figure out, why does everyone keep saying he's so much better than Tim Duncan? I was like, they won about the same, at least in terms of rings, right? Those were even. I was like, all their accolades about the same. Duncan won more MVP, but about the same amount of All-Stars, All-NBAs, all that shit. I'm like, was he that much better? And you dig, and you're like, the numbers tell a quite different story, right? Duncan was a superior player in every metric besides scoring points. Mm-hmm. And there is something, and this is the last piece on this before we get into some other stuff. There's something visceral, Henry, and emotional about Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant, whoever, right? It does something to your feelings. It says something about you as a person and what you value. And that has to matter. So I don't want fans to think that fucking give a care about your feelings. No. Like, it's important that like you jump out of your couch and popcorn spills when somebody does that. That's why we love the game. But that does not mean that it necessarily means that means winning, right? That just means, oh, it was really fucking incredible. But winning consistently is something different.
Well, and I think there's a very real and important thing, which is a lot of people love basketball because it's a model of me against the world. And if you feel me against the world, it's very frustrating to hear that, like, you need, like, Steph Curry's frustrating to root for because he needs Draymond. And Draymond needs Steve Kerr, and Steve Kerr needs Bob Myers, and Bob Myers, and like, and on and on, right? And like, what does Kevon Looney do? And like, and like, you know, all these things are really important, and that's how they win. And if you don't have the super team with you, how can basketball inspire you? No. Right? Like, it's tricky. Whereas, like, you know, Kobe was a gunslinger, right?
Gunslinger.
Like, yeah. And so what he did is something that you can go in the driveway, as I did as a kid, and you can imagine, like, I was alone in the driveway.
Me against the world. 5 guys draped on me. I'm going to score anyway.
I'm fading back and I'm holding it, and like, bam, we just won the world championship, right? Like it's frustrating to hear that you need the super team, right? It's frustrating to hear that, like, the way you succeed is by trusting other people, right? If you can't trust other people, right? And so I think that's a lot of what's come out of analytics is like the more than the player, the situation matters, right? Yes. So basically, are you open?
Yeah.
If you're open, you're a good NBA scorer. It's pretty much true, right? And are you single covered? Are you double teamed? Right? Like the stats are basically, don't shoot if you're double teamed. Like,
because someone else is open somewhere else. Right?
Also, you're not that good.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Like, yeah, you might be like, you know, a lot of I mean, actually, this comes up a little bit. Like, I still see people and like, oh, they should just sign Carmelo right now, right? Whoever it is,
and you're like,
Carmelo has the skill set that a majority of NBA fans want to succeed. Like that footwork stuff that he does, and like the array of moves that he has, like it would be a more enjoyable game to most viewers if that were what worked best, right? But you know, the Rockets, who was it? The Rockets or the Thunder? Like, I think it was the Rockets let him go like the first time he retired because he was an unplayable NBA defender, right? He just could not. He's actually in much better shape than his letter go around. Like, but like we didn't see that. So he's out there just ruining his team's chances, but he's doing all this little stuff around the free throw line, and and that's stuff that we want. That's stuff we can do. That's stuff we can work on. That's stuff every player practices, right? Those sets of moves are magical and revered in basketball.
Yes.
And so everyone's like, just like, of course he's really good at basketball because he's better at that than I am. It's like what other team I hear
other players say.
Yeah. It's like, these are like, it's true. He's amazing at that. It's just not true that is the be all and end all that we thought it was, right? Yeah. Bummer. Yeah.
Bummer.
The league's changing.
The league has changed. No, this is a fascinating conversation. I'm glad you were here to have it. Let's move to some current on the court stuff. Henry, the Sacramento Kings, for the first time in 16 years. What were you doing 16 years ago?
Probably yelling about advanced stats.
That tracks. That tracks. Probably was. Yeah, that definitely tracks.
What were you doing 16 years ago?
Probably coaching swimming. What was that 2000? Yeah, coaching swimming. Yeah, that sounds about right for me.
Yeah. Do you use advanced stats in swimming?
No. I will say this because we and the coaches that I were with and the teams that I were on, we were always forward thinking. We weren't the old school. All right, crank out your yardage. Here it is. The weekly plan is we're gonna get 40,000 in, and it's like, okay. Now look, sometimes there'd be days where we had to get yards in because that's just aerobically you needed that. Most of the time we practice race pace, and I guess race pace is what matters. We need to mimic race conditions so that on race day, your body's like, I know what to do here. Do this shit all the time. So, yeah.
And there is like and we can move on, but like there is advanced analytics in periodization, right? Like you taper, right? Like why?
Well, yes.
Well,
so we do use advanced stats, yes, because we taper, yes.
Like we don't exactly know. I guess people do kind of break down now. People start tapering a long time before they knew exactly what was happening in your bloodstream and in your kidneys and whatever, like why you're tapering, right? Because it's like, well, if you do X, Y result tends to come from it, right? Like, and we're going to keep refining that, right? Like that's what advanced analytics is, right?
We're just refining, man.
Yeah.
We're trying to optimize performance. Kings. Yeah, Kings, the Kings.
Goddamn Kings. Yeah. So they're still very poorly run.
Oh, what? That hasn't changed. Oh,
no, I take it back. Like, but mostly the story is like 1 out of 17 is not good, right? Like
that's bad. 1 out of 17,
more than half the league makes it every year.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
But yeah, they are legit. I mean, they're like Sabonis is 26. Like, these ages are actually Basketball Reference has this thing where it averages your age for the season.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's also sometimes wrong.
It also lies. It's like, no, I'm actually 25, like not 20.
Yeah, but by that measure, Sabonis 26, De'Aaron Fox 25, Keegan Murray 22, Kevin Huerter 24, Malik Monk 24, Dave Mitchell 24. Like, this is kind of exciting, right? Like the beam, they're going to be around for a while.
Seems like it.
People together.
Mike Brown's good. Like he's an excellent coach. He took some of that royal jelly from Golden State and he's sprinkling it up in Sacramento.
Yeah. And I'll tell you a weird thing that I don't know what to make of, but like at one point went way down the rabbit hole of like which teams perform well in crunch time. This was back when Mike Brown was coach of the Cavs, and it was at two different stops. His teams have been good in crunch time. I don't have any more information for you on what's working there, but like that's kind of a cool thing. They're going to be in the playoffs, and there'll be some tight thing, and like it doesn't mean he's perfect at it, but it means he doesn't suck.
Yeah. And they play with the number 1 pace in the league, even though, yes, in the playoffs, the game slows down, but they're still going to try. What pace still gets averaged in the playoffs. I would guess as long as they last, they're going to be among the better teams in pace, right? Because that's how they want to play. And that shit's a pain in the ass. We talked about with analytic stuff, like the realization that, okay, threes matter because it stretches the defense, wafer thin. Well, that's what you want in the playoffs, right? You want defenses in constant scramble mode, being like, who the hell am I supposed to guard? And when I watch Sacramento, they're just frenetic. And that's what I feel like. Who am I supposed to be guarding? Like, and if the opponent's asking that question, that's good news for the Kings, not so good for them.
Yeah. I mean, they're not a good defensive team.
They are not.
Well, like 22nd or something in defense?
Yeah, they're in the bottom third of the league in defense.
So that's probably going to cap their potential accomplishments this year, right? But they might win a series, I guess. You think they can win 2 series?
It depends on the matchup, right? So this is where matchups matter, right? What if it's, I know you're going to bet with this, but what if it's Golden State, Sacramento in round 1?
Which Golden State are we getting?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
This is what I'm saying. The Golden State that can't win on the road, that pisses the ball all over the board sometimes because they just,
What is up with the, like, my hunch is that the road thing isn't even real. It's just like there's always going to be a team with a big disparity. Happens to be them this year. Like, but
it's so odd for a defending champ, right? It's really odd for a defending champ, and they're so good at home. Look, they're old, and they've been to 6 finals in 8 years. Like, this shit happens, and Andrew Wiggins is not here, and like, it shit just gets hard. Like, right? Like, it's just really hard to keep doing this. That they played the Pelicans on not last night, the night before. They look god awful in the first half. Again, kicking the ball all over the court, just looking like a JV team. Draymond does his Draymond thing. I got to light a fuse under these guys. Brandon Ingram's coming down the floor. Draymond, click again. This doesn't show up in the box score. Oh, but I guess it does as a foul. Draymond purposely hard fouls Brandon Ingram. It gets the Pelicans to start jawing. He knows. Oh, this is.
Well, he had one more move too, which is Brandon Ingram's coming back in bounds. He's like.
Yeah.
He's like, oops, I was in your way.
in classic Draymond style, right? The benches get into it, but Draymond knows this is going to get my guys fired up, and it lit a competitive fire under them, right? All of a sudden, everybody's cutting a little bit harder, setting firmer screens, like racing a little bit faster, and lo and behold, they start doing things with more effort. Shock, they get better, right? They start making shots, and it's like you can't cheat the game, right? And maybe in that first quarter and a half, they were cheating the game, and Draymond said, all right, well, we can cheat the game now. And then, they did the thing. That's
remember that a long time ago, like Jason Kidd as a point guard ran into Mike Woodson and like, it was a trick and it worked. It wasn't in the game, right? And it's like there are occasionally these like kind of trump cards you can play, right? And
can't play them all the time,
right? So like Bob, it was also the game where like Bob Myers came down.
Talk about that.
Like you only do it once in a while, right? Like the Draymond does his whole mythology thing, right? And Steph Curry had an unbelievable night, like which he managed once in the finals, right? Like he get one really like I will carry you, like in one of those games. So with all of their tricks, like which aren't everyday tricks,
can't pull it every night.
Against a so team,
So that Bob Myers thing is interesting, and I wanted to highlight that the power of Bob Myers, and you alluded to this. It's easy in basketball to understand the solo star, right? Like Michael Jordan kind of screwed this up for everybody, right? Because that's how everybody thinks. It's like Jordan was a solo star that won 6 NBA titles, and it's like no, like he had the best wing defender in the history of basketball as his teammate, right? Like that also mattered, right?
And all these Horace Grants are still out there being like, you don't understand, he's an asshole. Right?
They're like, he is an asshole. Like, right? Yes, he can score points, but like, there's always other things. But that's Bob Myers, like being like, all right, Draymond, yeah, I see. No, you got to go back to the huddle now, because if you go back to the huddle, they're gonna foul, right? It's an ecosystem, right? And if and this is about Draymond Green, in that ecosystem, he is the organism that is volatile, right? Fucking who knows what day it's gonna be with him, right? He punched his teammate in the face, and during training camp, that maybe there's a reason why they're not playing so well. Who knows? That could have really caused problems, right? So the importance of everybody within the organization knowing their role and knowing how to do what is necessary for the whole thing to move forward. That's why the Warriors have been to 6 titles in 8 years, 6 championships in 8 years, right? And nobody else has been to more than, the Cavs, because LeBron was there. But right, like that's the only way you're able to do that. One guy can't do it. Although maybe LeBron's like, no, but I can, because I went to 10 straight finals. I am the exception to that rule. I can do it.
But it's, thinking back to the kid in the driveway who's imagining, being the king of the world or whatever. I do think there's like this relationship thing is actually the trump card, right? It's like you miss the relationships, right? That you wish you were part of a team like that, right? And imagine if Jerry Krause came down and talked to Dennis Rodman when Phil Jackson was head coach, right? Like Phil would have somehow gotten Jerry murdered, right? Like it's just not cool, right?
Not cool.
I do think that, like Bob Myers and Steve Kerr really feel each other, and Steve Kerr like defers responsibility and empowers people like all the time. You see it, like in every which way. I think he's for this absolutely incredible, right? And like Bob Myers knows it's okay for him to. I don't think he called Steve on the phone.
No, he just went over to Draymond and said, "Hey."
They've had these conversations for a long time, right? And they trust each other. And when they don't sign Bob Myers and they have, Kirk Lacob or whatever, like it will be, maybe he's as smart, maybe he's as hardworking, but this trust is hard to build, right? And Bob coming down and saying like, I know how to help here with this thing. And by the way, I control Draymond's future income.
Also, there's also which kind of matters. Draymond's so funny because he's so like, that's Bob. I love Bob. I'm like, I bet you do, because he like, but I do believe that Bob is very empathetic and good at building relationships. That I get, and that's what this game is. Like, this is the part that analytics can't measure, right? Like, if I don't have a relationship with you and I can't calm you down, or maybe Bob played a role in smoothing over that Jordan Poole situation. Who the fuck knows, right? Because on any lesser team, that would have been like, right? That would have been over. It'd have been like, we got to ship this dude out of here because they can't be in the same vicinity of each other without disaster happening. But they seem to have, weathered it as best as you can.
Yeah, and I do like if it's in the final score, analytics can measure it. I mean, quite seriously, right? Like, if you think about how EPM works, it just takes the win and just breaks it apart, right? And it's like, if it would have a hard time knowing who gave the halftime speech that made a difference, but you could look at everyone on the roster and see if like they tend to win more when that person's on the roster, right? Like for any assistant coach, any whatever, right? Like it is, it's actually, I think, our only hope of knowing that, right? Like if you just I don't know. Like, I mean, obviously you can go ask players like, who inspired you, right? Which is cool, but they'll lie.
I was gonna say, but do I trust them to tell me the truth? Or?
Yeah. But I do think there's like a, even if all you're looking for is heart, like if it's in a win, it's in the spreadsheet, which is not doesn't mean spreadsheets are magical or perfect, but it just means like stay curious, right? Like it's all there.
Stay curious.
Right?
Keep digging. Keep digging. Really quick before we get to top 5. As a Blazers fan, you had a little piece this week about tanking still fucking works in this league. God damn it. And it is, look, here, True, we're like abolish the draft because it's bullshit. The draft is a grift that the NBA runs on its fans, right? Like it's exactly what it is, because it convinces you all to believe that billionaires are right and we have to support them and players are wrong. And that's not a thing. And I say this all the time, all these guys who are uber capitalists and make billions of them, except for the buses, because that's family money, and that's their main business. Everybody else runs a hedge fund, a this, that, and a third. If they are true capitalists, then they should have no problem with that same system of free labor markets happening in the NBA, right? I don't care if you're in Oklahoma City or whatever terrible market you're in. You know what that means? And you got to be really fucking good at your job, right? Be awesome at player development. Be awesome at relationship building. You just got to be really good at it, and you will attract the top talent. If you stink, well, then you're not going to attract the top talent. And too many times with these owners, they're getting a rest on their laurels of like being shitty at their job, because it doesn't matter. We get the second pick, which means Scoot Henderson, come on down. You're going to come to insert crappy city here for 8 years, and we control it because you have nothing else to do. Too bad. Sorry.
Yeah. So like the Premiership doesn't have a draft, and what they have is like 6 or 7 teams, and then everyone else really can't hang, right? But we do have a salary cap, which so it really means that like Scoot's not going to the Warriors, right? Unless he wants to play for the minimum, right? So it's a little bit, it's not a free market, it
isn't, yeah.
Any team that can clear a max salary slot can get Scoot, right? And it probably won't be 10 teams that are doing that, right? Because it's very, very hard to clear that kind of money, right? So there'll be, whatever teams really want them. The big reason, that we have the draft, right, is because an NFL owner, I forget his name, like the New York Giants owner in like 1910, maybe something like that, was upset that he had to pay more to attract the Yale star he was trying to recruit, whoever it was, than his current best player. And you don't know if that player is going to be good or not. Right. That's the big worry, right? Yeah. It could cost the billionaire a bunch of money on someone who doesn't even play or tears his ACL or whatever, right? So they just wanted cost controls. And the draft worked for that. The notion that it makes bad teams good is
not true,
and in fact nothing does. Like there's literally like structural interventions to like make parity, like all don't work. Things have changed. Like the NHL got a lot more parity when they welcomed in a whole bunch of overseas players, so I mean there's just more talent that changed. But there's like economists have studied this a lot, and like everything that you think is a rule that's going to make bad teams good faster, like it doesn't work. Like it's just stuff that the billionaires say to make us root for them saving money. Like all of that stuff is just that. Like, and so it's I feel like the clock is ticking on it. Like it's just going to make less sense over time. And I don't know what the sticking points are in the CBA talks right now, but like, the notion that the draft is this fun thing that we all like. It's like, no, we're like wrapping up human beings like Christmas presents and like shipping them under the tree. Right? It's like, they probably don't want to be wrapped up.
Imagine if Victor gets drafted by Charlotte. Oh, he's going to be like, fuck, I want to play in Charlotte.
Well, somebody in the comments of my story was like, he like, or maybe I got an email, but I was like, he could legit just play in Europe.
He could. Yeah, he could just stay there.
Yeah.
But how's that work though? So like the team drafts you, they have your rights, like, and you can say I'm not coming, but like they still have your draft rights though, right?
Yeah. So I think that like FIBA leagues honor FIBA leagues contracts. So like if you sign a deal, you can't go play in Europe. But there's only like you can go play in China. I think like there's a few exceptional leagues where you can go even if you're like signed somewhere. But yeah, if he doesn't sign a deal, then they just hold your rights. I think There's some kind of way where if they don't sign up a certain amount of time, I think you give him a free agent, but I forget how that goes.
Well, he is young enough that like maybe it's okay, right? Because he's only 18, so maybe let's say it's 3 years, then he's 21 when he can either re-enter or he's a free agent or whatever the rule is.
I can't remember how it goes. It might be that he's just screwed, but my guess is that what really happens is he has an aggressive agent who can threaten that, and then they just move him or
they figure it out because the NBA wants him to be there. That's very clear. They want Victor. All right, Henry. It is top 5 time. No pressure. All right. Typically, how we do it is I kick it off with my 5, and then you go 5. I go 4, back and forth, as usual. Because I'm the host and I cheat.
Wait, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's how it works. When you're the host and you make the rules, you can do whatever you want. So on my 5 line, 2 teams, Grizzlies and Cavs.
Oh, yeah, that is totally cheating.
Listen, I can't. What do you want me to do? Grizzlies are the number 2 team in the West. You know how I feel about the Grizzlies. And the Cavaliers, number 1 in adjusted net rating. They're really fucking good.
Okay, here's what I want you to do. Don't call it top 5.
Okay, here we go. Championship tier.
You have the Grizz Cavs.
Grizz Cavs. Yeah, that's one team. Grizz Cavs.
My 5th team is the Warriors.
I knew you'd find a way to put them in there.
Because
I knew it.
You know why.
I know.
I don't have to explain this to you.
I don't have to explain why. Listen, the infrastructure is there. We've seen it before. We've seen this movie before.
I just explained why they suck a second ago.
But the reverse of that is why they're good. So there we go.
I mean, if they're in the first round, every playoff matchup they have, part of your brain is going to be like,
particularly when they do the start thing where Draymond starts doing his stuff, and it's like, oh shit, here they come. Yeah, no doubt. All right, number 4, Nuggets.
Cavs.
Ooh, you like the Cavs. Mm-hmm. Do you worry that they're just, they're just a little young, right? They haven't quite done it as a collective. Donovan Mitchell's, but the rest of them, they haven't quite done it together yet.
I like that they have bouncy ligaments.
They do. They have Jarod Allen, Evan Mobley have lots of bouncy ligaments. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that matters.
No, I like the Cavs. Yeah.
All right, number 3, your favorite team, the Philadelphia 76ers.
The who?
Henry hates Philadelphia 76ers. Just so
I don't hate them. I have a sort of deep-seated mistrust of
James Harden.
I guess James Harden and Doc Rivers at this stage of his career,
and Joel Embiid,
and Joel Embiid's health.
Yeah. Well, listen, those are all reasons to be like,
Yeah. I think it's like a 3-legged stool, and I don't like any of the legs.
Yeah. Well, listen. Yeah. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
All right.
So number 3, I have the Denver Nuggets.
Okay. And I mean, this is easy now. I think we have the same top 2. Boston Celtics, 2 for me.
That's for me too. Yeah.
And the Milwaukee Bucks, number 1.
Okay, so that's it's conventional, it's wise. Do you actually think, Jarod, that the Milwaukee Bucks will be this year's NBA champions?
As we just spent 90 minutes, not 90, but a whole hour talking about predicting the future's hard, Henry.
They're very hard.
But if I had to flip a coin 10 times and the Bucks were on one side of it, I guess it only come half the time. But I trust that half more than I trust any other half of the coin.
Yeah, it's an interesting year. I try to just picture it. I'm like, okay, we're in June, and the confetti's falling, and who's got that trophy? Is it Brook Lopez?
I mean, look, it very well could be. I don't like what's happening with Jason Tatum right now in Boston. I'm a little worried about that. What's happening there? The Cavs, I said, the only thing that worries me about them is they're young. So, young teams tend not to win titles just because, in tight moments, they don't have that collective, we know what to do here.
If they did, though.
Oh, it'd be great if they did.
Yeah.
It'd be the league would freak the fuck out. And then the Sixers, all the concerns you mentioned, even though I didn't mention them, I have it. I love Denver, and I love Michael Porter Jr. I don't love their defense. Right? Yeah. So, and I love my Grizzlies, but, they got some issues too. So.
It's funny. It's easiest for me to picture Boston, right? That's kind of
interesting. Despite the Tatum struggles right now, you're like, no,
that's a big problem. Yeah, that's a big problem. Yeah.
I do love this, and I said this before. I love for Boston and why I could see it, the collective bitter disappointment from last year. That is a fucking motivator. When San Antonio lost that series to the Heat, I was like, oh shit, man. It works one of two ways. You either are terrible next year and it's over, or fuck that, we're gonna mow people down. And they mowed everybody down next year. I can see it.
They're gonna eat their berries. You know, they're gonna like they're gonna eat all berries. The little details are gonna be just right. You know.
Well, it has to be if they want to win, right? And they need some luck, right? That's the other thing. They're gonna need some injury luck. Like we know that. Whatever team has the guy that sprains his ankle or whatever, or is like 70%, well, that's gonna probably severely impact you. Yeah. All right, folks. Enjoy the end of the regular season. When we come back next week, I think we'll be right towards the end. Last game, I think, is April 9th. So we'll have one more week of games. And then that'll be it, friends. Time for the play-in and then go time.
Get your rest in now.
I mean, Jesus, those guys. How lucky, though, that the teams that like already clinched, like they're in the playoffs, they have a week off. It's like, but who's going to actually utilize that shit for real? They're going to be fucking practicing like maniacs.
Yeah, probably.
Probably. All right, guys. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you next week.